Last week, I was talking to a colleague about how things were going in his church, and he paused for a moment and then he said, so much has changed and so much has been lost. Really, like everything has changed. So that if I really start to think about it, I might not recover. So I just don't. This is how a lot of us feel about the news about climate change, especially when we set it up against other headlines of today, like the destruction from Russia, or the latest crazy contagious COVID variant, or the latest officer involved shooting. We have reached a point of sort of maximum catastrophe, so that there's a point where we just simply cannot think about it, or we will teeter over into that place of despair that Becky described. We just simply cannot take it in. Closer to home, I realized this week that by June, we will have had more memorials in our Foothills community in the first 6 months of this year than we've had in the whole of the last 6 years. So many people that we have loved have died. And at the same time, so many new babies have been born, babies that are now toddlers in many cases. People have fallen in and out of love. Some have started whole new jobs, new careers. Others have retired. Homes have been bought and sold. We have all aged, all of us. And we have all been changed. Almost exactly 2 years ago, on that first Sunday where we went all online, we led a service that we called the State of Emergency. It was a play on the word emergence, which is that idea that recognizes the constant influx of novelty and creativity at work across all of life, that there's often lots of things going on, and so that suddenly some big change is happening, but it's happening not all of a sudden, but actually because there was a lot of newness happening all along. And the title was also intentionally an acknowledgement of the emergency that we were literally thrown into, the emergency of the pandemic, that then in turn intersected with the emergency of racial injustice, which also intersected with the ongoing emergency of the climate crisis. And these emergencies happened at the same time that all of those realities of life and the ways that we are changing kept happening. Now, in a state of emergency, all we really have is react. Like, all we have is fight or flight or freeze. You are caught in a state of reaction so that you can survive. It's a really good thing because we want to survive. And we also know that this is not a way that we can live long term. Even if the trouble has not fully passed, and even if the pandemic has not fully passed, which we know it hasn't, even if, as Paul Hawken reminds us and other climate scientists and activists would remind us, the bigger trouble is actually still to come. At a certain point, if you are going to keep going, at least if I'm going to keep going, you do have to stop taking things in a way that feels like that state of emergency. You got to move out of the reaction. I need to move out of the reaction and into that intentional response. We must make a choice for how we are going to live. And by that, I don't mean make a choice to deny or play make-believe or submit to the blind optimism that Sean argued against so well a few weeks ago. I also don't mean to shirk responsibility for our failures or to sidestep grief. I actually kind of mean the opposite. I mean to recognize these things and then to acknowledge that there is an alternate story that we want to live from. that we can choose to live from. That is a story of expansion and generativity and creativity. It is that choice that Becky was speaking about, of moving from decomposing to recreation, to be like the fungi. That is to turn what has died into fertile ground for what needs to be born. Even if we will not be there to see that birth in its full life. Let me give you an example of what I mean. A few weeks ago, I was feeling really down about the anti-queer and anti-trans moves happening across the country. The Don't Say Gay law in Florida is getting all the attention, but the thing was really getting to me was the laws in Texas and Tennessee that regard a parent's gender affirming care, which, let's be clear, is often literally life-saving care. These laws think of this, perceive this care as an act of abuse. So I was just feeling all these echoes from the past. That is a visceral fear for all the ways that, again, it would be unsafe, less safe to be queer, and even less safe to be trans in our country. I could feel that state of emergency washing over me. And then, right then, in the middle of that feeling, I felt another feeling rising in me. That is the sort of clarity that Sean preached about last Sunday. That is the clarity of my own worth and the clarity of all people's worth across all genders and sexual orientations and all ways of loving and being loved. And I remembered Audre Lorde, who said, "Your silence cannot protect you." And I remembered the very first Unitarian Universalist church that I attended in 1999, when I had just come out and everything was upside down. And my partner and I felt so alone. And I remembered how that church saw us. That is, they saw our dignity and our inherent worth. They saw us together and they welcomed us, and we held hands in the back of church, and people were happy that we were there, and we were just crying just every service, because we felt so welcome, and we felt that we could feel our own healing and our own changing, and that welcome, that affirmation of our dignity, it was one big reason that I am standing here right now. So I remembered this legacy, which is the inheritance, what we inherit in our faith. And I thought, in our church, it isn't just that we reject that Don't Say Gay bill. In our church, we say, be more gay. In our church, we say, be more trans. In our church, we say, be more expansive, be more curious, be more hopeful, be more courageous, be more love, be more you. Which is what led me to invite a group of lay leaders to start meeting a few weeks ago, to start talking about a campaign that we could call Be More Gay. It turns out that we had an unofficial launch on Easter, you might have noticed. But coming soon, there will also be bumper stickers and yard signs and t-shirts, and we'll be hosting a support group for trans kids, trans youth, and their parents. And with our partners, we will offer support groups for queer BIPOC youth and young adults. And there will definitely be a big party later in the summer, and we will be hosting a drag queen day here at church. These are just some of the initial ideas we have had. So all of this is what I mean about what it means to choose to respond rather than react. It means to choose generativity and possibility and a way of life, whatever might come our way. It is, as Adrienne Marie Brown writes in her poem called Be Careful, I Am Fertile. She writes, it is knowing the beauty of our own reckoning. All those years, asleep in delicious fog that was only winter. It is the knowing that I am not alone, that there are many of us howling at starlight, growing the next generation of awe and wonder, of fractal fate. It is knowing, as Becky says, that we are a part of the kingdom of fungi, transforming all that has been lost into nourishment for what will come next. It is the being aware of our own power. That is knowing that we contain multitudes, that there is no such thing as an individual being. It is knowing that we are all fertile beings, capable of creating so much life in all of our networks and all of our connections. That is when we choose. This is the spirit that pushes me out of despair about all we face, including, maybe especially, including the climate crisis, which so often we do talk about as an emergency, which it is. It's just that the only way to keep moving forward, the only way to respond rather than just react is to take ourselves out of that state of emergency and then move with intention into positive action. That is to make a conscious choice to live, as Marge Piercy says, as if I liked myself, and then it may be true. That's from one of her poems. I think what she means is that we might live as if we love life, as if we can look around at all this beauty and believe that it must keep going and going and going. And it is the choice to know that even, as I said, that we may not live to see the world we are building, we will still plant the seeds that we can, till the soil, and sing out with joy all along the way. Hawkins' book and his website, regeneration.org, offer so many examples of positive response and choices for how to live aligned with life. There's an overwhelming number of options, and he also lists out not just the kind of individual ways to respond and to move in that positive direction, but also communal ways, group ways, particular group ways, corporate ways, municipalities, global or national and global. He really offers that acknowledgement of that there is not just there's no one single being, and we need all the options on the table. So one of my favorites from his offerings is his invitation to engage more intentionally with efforts in our community for diversifying and localizing our food sources, especially when those are driven by Black, Indigenous, and people of color members of our community that are seeking to re-engage traditional practices. This invitation, which it's recognizing the ways that the food industry has such a major impact on climate change, but it just doesn't seek to resist or react to those destructive practices. Instead, it seeks to set up camp in an alternate vision of life. That is to align ourselves with nourishment and beauty. That is also community building, relationship building. You can see this spirit alive, I think, in our Foothills Sustainable Supper that's hosted by our climate justice team, and in our partnership with the local farm here that offers all kinds of programs for children and youth called Sproutin' Up. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space is our power to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and our freedom. These words have been attributed to Holocaust survivor and philosopher Viktor Frankl, although it's more accurate to say they mostly just represent his core philosophy, because he proclaimed that even in the midst of the worst possible circumstances, like those he experienced and survived, even then we can still have agency. Even then we can make choices. Even then we can have ideas. Even then we might birth a new creation. The pandemic and the polarities of the last few years have made our world feel very small. We have practiced diminishing our possibilities as an exercise in compassion and safety and care. And the potential volatility of our conversations has kept so many of us feeling like we've been backed into a corner, unable to connect. So much has been lost, and so much has changed, which to me means that it must be time to build. That is, must be time to plant and to grow and to create together that life centered around joy and liberation and abundance for all, which necessarily includes our planet from which we are inseparable. It must be time to make choices every day that regenerate life, choices that put life in the center of life. In all of our networks, in all of our multitudes, it must be time to consider the fullness of our impact and the trajectory of our dreams and all the ways that we can move that would be more gay. By which I mean, of course, more generative, more expansive, more life-giving, more creative, and more free for us all. May it be so, and amen. I'm so grateful to welcome now Peg McMorris and Gail Marie Kimmel from our climate justice team, who are going to offer an invitation to practice this regeneration and generativity and alignment with life right here in Foothills.